you don't have a background in film, and I always find that that's a fascinating place to begin for somebody that maybe doesn't have aspirations as a filmmaker but finds their way to it. Do you look to any filmmakers without a traditional background in the medium for inspiration, whether it be for the film or just your own interest in terms of seeing someone's trajectory as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, that's such an interesting question. There are definitely filmmakers that, Alex and I come from the art world. Alex is a visual artist. I'm an art historian and writer. And there are a few people that have, paved this path before us. So we are not the first. There's Steve McQueen and Julian Schnabel.
Sam Taylor Wood. Robert Longo made a film called Johnny Mnemonic.
But then there, we also, because we've had this career in another discipline, we're not coming to filmmaking in our 20s, which, has its pluses and minuses. And we always take solace in the fact that Michael Haneke was like 47 when he made his first feature. And we're like, phew, we're younger than that. We've still got time.
Yeah. It's something I've always really loved, filmmakers who come from another discipline. And there are some quintessential filmmakers. For example, Alfred Hitchcock started off as a production designer. Ridley Scott was a painter. Obviously Ridley Scott and many other filmmakers often come from advertising, which I feel is a different perspective. There are people who are actors first, like Jesse Eisenberg.
Yeah, but those are all still like within one industry. I mean, I think that for us, the fact that you would think that the art world and the film industry would have more crossover, but they actually don't. And in part because they're such different business models, but also because they're just very different disciplines. And so we kind of came to filmmaking from, a cinephile's perspective and from a naive place, which I think was a superpower for us because we just made something with absolutely no we had no, there was no strategy. People ask us oh, did you think you would end up at the Oscars when you made this? And we're like, absolutely not. We had no idea whether this was for a museum or for a cinema. And, we learned about the film festival circuit as we were applying to them. We didn't know when we made this that 36 minutes is absurdly long for a short and that no distributor would want to touch us, And so we ended up applying to all the film festivals ourselves and really learning.
I think paradoxically, when you make something, because sometimes short films are considered a stepping stone or a visiting card or whatever the expression is. And I sometimes, not to denigrate any other short films, but sometimes if you feel that in the film itself, like the film is not being made for the love of itself. And I think paradoxically, when you make something with no ulterior intentions whatsoever, just because you love these characters, you love this world, you want to spend time with them, you don't know, it's far too long for any festival. It doesn't really matter. Audiences connect to that sincerity.
Yeah, and luckily our film did find its place in great part because of Barry Jenkins, who, people ask us, did we have a connection with him? And no, we did not. We actually didn't even meet him at Telluride when we premiered. We met him a year and a half later when he was graciously kind enough to do a talk with us in LA. But he found our film, I think he finds the majority of the films that he programs at Telluride just through Film Freeway. And, it was...
But Telluride, just to nitpick, Telluride you apply directly on the website.
Oh, right.
But that's a very boring film festival.
No, please, because that's the kind of stuff I love talking about. Just knowing that Barry Jenkins is going on, to Freeway still and looking for stuff is always exciting because it's the passion is there. And something that you mentioned just now in terms of caring about the narrative and the story that you're telling is something I wanted to talk to you both about because you've talked a little bit about it in conversation before, but how important is emotion within an absurd sort of structure and a world where, garlic gum and, having to breathe before entering, a building, it also exists?
I mean, for us, emotion is everything. It's the reason that we wanted to make film. I think because emotion is so particular to cinema, it's a really democratic medium in the sense that everyone is versed in film and knows how to read, someone's face. And so so we often, I think a lot of people compare our films to Yorgos Lanthimos, but we often say like we're actually trying to make a Joachim Trier film with absurdity, because what we care about the most, to quote him, is tenderness. And, he recently said tenderness is the new punk, and we couldn't agree more.
And I think the films that closest to our own films that have always really resonated with us are those ones where the absurd premise really resonates with the human experience that's being portrayed in them. I think we both grew up at a time when Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind was hugely impactful, and that's a film that is fanciful and visually audacious, but everything is in service of a very relatable experience of trying to have love and being in a relationship and trying to keep alive a relationship that's maybe broken, and what that means, and the heartbreak of that.
Yeah, you really do feel that heartbreak. And it is interesting that you brought up both Joachim Trier and Yorgos Lanthimos, because I do feel like there's also, I guess, maybe a recency bias, because, Yorgos in the last, decade or so has really kind of cemented himself as a filmmaker in North America. I think like after Dogtooth, it kind of felt like people were really starting to pay attention to him. And once he kind of switched over to English speaking narratives, that was kind of the thing. But I was thinking as well, like, there are throughout the history of cinema, obviously Buñuel comes up a lot as well, and Paul Verhoeven. A lot of those guys are incredible visionaries and aesthetically can design these worlds, but sometimes they lack the emotion. And I know this is also another recency bias thing, but like I was thinking between this and Matthew Rankin's Universal Language, where the narratives play within an absurdity or a satire, but then they find a way to creep in and bring this emotion that the filmmakers themselves feel as though they're expressing. And this very much feels like that quite a bit. When you're writing a script, going back to coming from the visual world, do you have any kind of feeling as though you have to kind of temper your expectations in terms of the writing process when you're making a movie?
I mean, what we're always searching for is that sort of like it hits your heart moment, and and I think we're particularly that's kind of our. I hesitate to say it's our thing, because it's a lot of filmmakers' things, but it is the thing that we're always searching for. And the film had ended a little bit earlier, and then we added this final moment, and we felt like. And when we found that final moment, we were like, oh yeah, that is the emotional heart of the film.
And human behavior is unchangeable, even if it's distorted by the structures that we put people within. They will always want to form human connections, to love and be loved, and they will always betray one another and seek someone out, but be too cowardly to reach out to them.
Well, it depends on the scenario, but but human behavior remains unchanged no matter the circumstances.
Yeah.
Do you feel the absurdity of the film plays differently than when you initially made it? I know, Natalie, you've talked about before the woman life freedom movement, especially going in Iran, happening right now in Iran, but also, like you look at another filmmaker like Mohammad Rozalov, who made The Seed of the Sacred Fig, that also took a lot of inspiration from that as well.
We were always inspired by sort of the violence that we felt like was becoming more and more prevalent in our world, and the rise of autocracies around the world, and sort of like this feeling that, if while we were growing up in the like 80s and 90s, things we had the sense that there was such a thing as progress, that like we were sort of slowly moving in the right direction, even if things weren't great. Now it's become clear that there's sort of an ebb and flow to things, and we're definitely not moving in an upwards trajectory. Like, we're starting to lose hard-won civil liberties, like even here at home. And so I think that, I think that other people, though, however, when they first watched our film, maybe thought that it was, I know Barry Jenkins has talked about this, that the first time he saw it, he felt like it was like a sort of science fiction farce-like film, but that when he rewatched it a year later, he was like, no, this film isn't just like tomorrow, it's today, it's already here. So I think that the way that people have perceived it has also changed over time.
And you don't make a film hoping that it will become prescient or hoping that it will become topical. I mean, quite the opposite. So it's been kind of heartbreaking to be experiencing this wonderful experience of being shortlisted and then being nominated for an Oscar. And meanwhile, the events in the United States with ICE kidnapping people off the streets, shooting them, defenseless people in the back, has been awful. And then what's happened in Iran, which is very much an example of the power of media and what happens when you shut down an entire country with the hope that images will not leak out and that people will forget and then commit a crime against humanity, mass murder. It's truly awful. But in those kind of situations, you wonder what is the role that art and cinema can play.
And obviously, it is a powerful one, because otherwise, the Washington Post is firing all of its arts writers. The universities are getting rid of their humanities. Like people don't do that unless they see those mediums as a threat.
Well, we often think about there's a beautiful line in the Mikhail Bulgakov's The Master and the Margarita, which is manuscripts don't burn, which speaks to the power of art to endure no matter how much societies try to wipe it off the face of the earth.
Were you thinking about the role of tradition versus modernity as reflected across different generations of characters when in that writing process?
Natalie's talked often about how the story is the story of three characters from three different generations. The character of Petulant, the antagonist, is perhaps one of the most interesting characters, because for us it feels like she's internalized these rules with the expectation that she will be rewarded. A friend of ours who's an Iranian screenwriter talked about how sometimes people who lost loved ones in the Iran-Iraq war as martyrs who have suffered because of what the government did are actually the most vehemently in support, because they've already lost, they've already sacrificed, all their chips are in the pot, as it were. If the game finishes, then what was the point, as it were? There's and for a character like Petulant, she is in a small way, she has sublimated her own desires and her identity to the rules of a store where she works on commission, and she will be rewarded.
And falsely believes that sort of like a societal or financial gain will be the key to her happiness. Which is also what our main character, Angine, believes at the beginning of the film. She's sort of lying to herself that she can satisfy her needs through consumption. And then, she, unlike our antagonist, realizes what she really needs, which is human connection. We were definitely thinking about these three characters across three different generations. And Melez being the young character who, for us, was really inspired by a lot of these the youth, whether it's students at Columbia University protesting,
or at Kent State University,
or in the 1970s, or in Iran. It's not true that it's not specific to the youth, but I think that young people do sort of question things more than older generations that sometimes get inured to.
Yes, they get beaten down too, and these are just the way things are.
Was it important to be explicit with the casual violence without being exploitative? And did sound design play a part in how you wanted to present the slap, especially the first time around?
I mean, sound design is pivotal to our whole film. We had an incredible sound designer named Damien Volpe, who is a dear friend of ours and much too talented to be working with us. He sort of, maybe now with our Oscar nomination, we should be like, we're worthy. Yeah. But he slotted us in. We didn't have a budget to work with him because we really put everything that we had, which is a lot less than I think people think, when they see our film, which, sort of looks really ostentatious because of the setting that it's
location,
in.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah, we put it all on screen, and then in post we had nothing left. And Damien worked with us over months, slotted us in a few hours here, a few hours there, and the slaps in particular was sort of like it's all sold through the sound because none of those slaps are real.
Because if you slap someone in real life to the face, there's no sound; it's just a dull thud.
Yeah.
Our entire conception of violence in cinema is all through sound design, be it from Hong Kong films where it's to Fight Club where it's crunch pounds of meat. And that's not actually the sonic experience.
And so the slaps in our film are actually many different slaps that are layered on top of one another, like sometimes up to 5 of them, in order to create the right impact.
Yeah.
But it was meant to feel monotonous, just something that they had become
uncountable.
Doreen St. Felix wrote a really interesting text about our film where she talked about like how violent it is to mark the face, which is like the most sacred thing in a film.
Well, even your poster, right? Like the poster of the film, and even like thinking about like, Dreyer with The Passion of Joan of Arc, like the face is such an important feature to narrative.
Yeah, and for us, part of that was also talking about, the how the signifiers of wealth, no matter how absurd, are mimicked by people that don't have that wealth. So whether it's in Elizabethan times and
people eating sugar and having rotten black teeth, to in the 1700s and 80s people going on holiday and getting bronzed hands, or throughout all history there's been
or whether it's a fake Louis Vuitton bag, like the sort of markers of wealth are always mimicked. And we were trying to touch on like the intersection of power and money and wealth and social status and desire.
Do you feel as though the black and white cinematography reveals an ugly side of the luxury department store? And was there any hesitation of using a location like that based on like what it represents in our reality?
For us, actually, the black and white represented more like functions more like an X-ray. So for us, like it extracts all of the distraction that is color, and it really allows us to focus in on like the geometry of the space, but also the faces of the characters. So we really zero in on the thing that is before us, and it's almost, coming from the visual arts, it's almost like the way that you begin, drawing with a pencil on paper. You start at the basics and then you build from there.
And even within the conception of the story, because in the story, slapping is meant to be perfunctory and banal. It's how you pay for stuff. But because they're not allowed to embrace, the characters of Angine and Malaise take slapping and consumption and kind of twist it to make it into a sensual and erotic act. And I think when she's bleeding onto the glove of the store, we've kind of done what we were hoping to set out to do conceptually, which is to blemish and mark and disrupt the existing rituals of a department store.
I just want to ask the two of you, in terms of your own tastes in movies, do you tend to agree on things, or is it something where you have your own kind of singular tastes and you kind of meet each other in the middle somewhere?
We always agree in terms of like what we like absolutely love. I think there's only one time when we've disagreed about a film, and it won't be named here. But
is it a recent movie? Is this?
It's not so recent, but it's the filmmaker's alive and thriving.
Okay.
But otherwise, we really do agree. But that being said, like we do have like different niches that we particularly love and we bring to the table. So like Alex is like a huge fan of Pixar and
Disney and Studio
Ghibli, sort of more playful, imaginative cinema. And I would say that I'm a little bit more in love with like dark, realist, grounded films, like
But I think we both.
But we both love the same, like I also love Studio Ghibli, and at the intersection of that there is so much crossover, so that we like the things that we love the most are the same.
And we really love Michael Haneke, and ironically, there are certain Pixar films that we feel are Michael Haneke films. Like, for example,
what do you? Yeah, I gotta ask.
Isn't the plot of The Piano Teacher the same plot as Soul by Pixar? You have a character who is plays the piano, is unhappy, has creative ambitions, but whose psychosexual life is distorted by their mother. It's Soul. Right? Or a story about an old couple who are one of them is dying and the other one doesn't want to let them go. Amor. Also up.
Yeah, so there is some, Alex and I will often play a game where we'll be like, okay, what film is this? And we'll describe a couple of sentences of it. And we try to trip each other up, but we always know what the other one is actually thinking.
We're saying that in jest, but that actually speaks to the fact that this is a fun exercise, because Pixar and Michael Haneke appear to be such different polarities of filmmaking and such different tones, but actually they are interrogating similar thematics and the human condition, and they will often echo each other by having almost the same plot.
What do you hope for the long term for a movie like this? Because short films don't usually get, physical media releases. I know it's online on the New Yorker, but is it something that you think about in terms of what the life of a movie like this will be, a decade from now or 20 years from now even?
I mean, the film has already traveled so much further than we could have ever possibly imagined, and it's being watched by people all over the world. Our letterbox is filled with reviews from people in Brazil and India and Iran, and so it's been already so because the reason that you make a film is that you hope, or any work of art, is that you hope that it will connect with an audience, and the film has been doing that. So we just hope that it continues to reach people. It is widely available all over the world on the internet.
I hope it's the beginning of a relationship with the audience that will follow us into our next film and the film after that.
It has been an absolute pleasure talking to the two of you and getting a chance to, pick your brain and just having a really wonderful conversation. And the movie is lovely. And thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So nice.